Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. Usually in my Creative Inspiration series, I present work from other photographers who have inspired me and encouraged me to go out and photograph. But today I'd like to present a project of mine that was very meaningful to me. Now, as some of you probably don't know, most of you probably don't know, in real life, I am not a professional photographer. I am a professional cardiologist. And living in the current era of medicine, I really came up with an idea for a photographic project. In this particular time in medicine, as many of you probably know, if you've been patients yourself for sure, it's an era of some degree of depersonalization in medicine. It's an era of corporate medicine. And frankly, it's an era where doctors are afforded less time to be with patients because the time they spend with patients is really relegated not by them anymore for the most part. That's a whole other discussion. But at any rate, I did have an idea that I thought was going to be very meaningful to me in terms of my practice of medicine. When you go down the street and see someone that's 80 years old, when you see someone that's 80 or 90 years old in the office, we often don't think about the fact that they've had life experiences like we have. They've had adolescence, they've had young adulthood, they've done things during their life that have perhaps changed their life and, given history, have changed our lives, if you look back at people that are old enough. And, we don't see that in people when we just glance at them or see them very quickly. And I thought it would be interesting to take portraits of some of my patients and have them tell us, the things in their life that have been their defining moments, the things in their life that have really molded them and stand out as being things that were very important to them. And also, not just that, to be able to tell their caretakers, medical professionals, other people taking care of them, what they would like us to know about them in order to take care of them better. And I thought that would be really a meaningful thing, perhaps not only for me, but maybe even for the patients and the people that I was caring for. Well, in this day and age, you can't just go out and record people and take their pictures. You had to get permission. It was sort of a fun thing to do that really committed me, in a sense, to the project, was to go and get permission from the hospital that I worked for at the time to do this. And you actually had to get consent, obviously, from the patients to record them and use their images. So what did I get after all this? Well, I got some stories that were really very moving and very interesting. For example, the story from a 95-year-old man who was a guard outside the Nuremberg Trials right after World War II. Story about the survivor of a cardiac arrest and what that event meant to him as a person and what it'll mean to him for the rest of his life. The story from a Vietnam vet who really didn't want to talk about his experiences, but in the process of non-talking really said a lot. Korean War veteran who, under heavy bombardment, was one of the first people to utilize echo triangulation to try to locate the position of the enemy in order to survive. Again, I'd like to think that this exercise was meaningful to the patients as well as to myself. And I'm going to put a link to the full project down in the description of the video, but I'd like to show you some of the highlights in this video along with the audio and the portraits. Also, and I guess this is some testimony to the fact that it was meaningful, the hospital actually got me to make large prints. You can see I have a large wide format printer. And in some of their outpatient areas, put up a display of large portraits along with sound bars so that people could listen to the stories these people had to say as well as looking at their portraits. And what was really cool was that we invited the people whose portraits were hung to the opening. And I got some cool cell phone shots of the patients standing in front of their own portraits. And you could tell it was really meaningful for them there to see people, looking at them and listening to their stories. What can I say? It was really just a touching thing. And if you listen on towards the end of the video, I'm going to put some of those cell phone shots at the end if you want to have a look at them. And let's get started. I just want to say one thing before we go and take a look at the project. And that has to do with the title of the project, which I called the Empathy Project. And initially, I didn't like that name because to me, the word empathy had a little bit of a sense of condescendingness to it. But when you look at the definition of what the word empathy means, it means the ability to understand the feelings of another. When I looked at that, it really seemed like it wasn't condescending at all. And it turned out, at least to me, using that definition, to really be the perfect name for the project. Now let's go and see what we got.
I grew up in a small town in Armstrong County called Rural Valley. My mother was widowed in 1922, and she raised my brother and I as a seamstress during the 20s and through the Depression.
That must have been a tough time to live through, the Depression.
Well, we were all about the same. We weren't poor because nobody told us, but very few people had anything. But it was a good time in life to be raised in a small town because everybody knew everybody, everybody helped everybody.
And you were just about to tell me something about the Nuremberg Trials after World War II?
Yeah, I had the outer security. If you understand, they did not know what was going to happen.
Sure, I can imagine.
Whether the Germans would try to free them, whether there would be a rebellion or what. So there was spit and polish guys that you see on the newsreel. They were all the same height. They stood behind the prisoners. There was a company that guarded the jail, which was next to the courthouse. And in the company that I was in, or I happened to be a first sergeant, and we had what we called the outer security. We kept jeeps and armed men ready in case there would be a problem. And we circled that area of the city. Fortunately, nothing ever happened. We were young. We didn't realize history was being made.
Was it shocking to you?
Well, I knew that they were prisoners, that they had done things that you shouldn't have done, that they were almost animals, some of them. Goring was very, very, I don't quite know how to say it, but he was very arrogant. He was, and as you know, he did commit suicide. But I think what the Depression and the war taught us was we learned to survive. Regardless of what happened, we could overcome it, we could do it. I think that we learned it the hard way. Yeah.
And how old are you now?
Well, in 2 months I'll be 95.
What would you like people to know about you after that milestone?
I'm just a plain common individual who's been fortunate to live a number of years. I'm sure some people like me and some people don't like me, but
it's hard to imagine not
one
liking
either
you.
way isn't going to make a whole lot of difference.
Not at this point, huh?
No, no, I've led a very happy life, a very good life.
So you have a pretty interesting job, blacksmith, as I remember.
Yes, you're right.
How'd you get into that?
Well, I was always a knife maker and a sword maker, and I ran into a friend of mine that explained to me how blacksmithing would actually help everything I was doing with knife and sword making, and it really did.
What do you like about it the most? What really hits home for you?
It's just the fact that I can create something the old way, not the new way any longer, the old way. And all of my tools, I don't use a gas forge, I use a coal-fired forge. I don't have a power hammer, I use my arm in my hammers. And I just enjoy it a whole lot more. I mean, I know blacksmiths that have all these new upgrades and tools, but I don't use that stuff. I want to do everything the old way, the way maybe my great grandfather may have done it. And that's just more important to me. And what you turn out is seriously a one-of-a-kind object that you could never beat out again. Everything is just a touch different. So
It's sort of like a painting. You can't.
it is. It's an artistic work, even though as far as with a brush and paints, I'm no artist, but I feel like I am in this genre.
So what would you like people to know about you?
Just that I'm old GW Pappy. That's what everybody calls me. And I'm the knife maker. Everybody, I know people all over the area from actually a few states. They call me GW the Knife Maker. They don't know my real name.
So you've been through quite a bit. You're a survivor of a cardiac arrest.
I am.
How did that change your life?
It made me realize that it's no longer the big things in life that you care about. It's about the little things that matter. The daily sunrises, the sunsets, the people around you, your friends, your family. That's truly all you need to get through life is with those guys.
So it's interesting the sort of clarity that going through something like that can give you. Does it get easier over time?
Yes. No. Yeah. No. It doesn't. It doesn't get easier over time. It actually gets. I'd say it gets a little bit harder because as the time goes on, it's more of. I'm more nervous about when's it going to happen again.
Of course, it's not necessarily going to happen again.
No, not at all.
As a matter of fact, the odds are very low that it would ever happen again.
Well, and I appreciate that because of you. That I believe.
So some people, when they've had events like this with a cardiac arrest, have said that they've experienced out-of-body experiences or felt or saw or smelled odd things. Do you remember anything like that?
No, I didn't see no bright light. I didn't hear any angels singing. And on the other hand, I didn't smell any sulfur or brimstone either. So yeah, I pretty much just stayed where I was.
So you're good on both counts.
I'm good on both counts for now.
So if there was one thing that you wanted other people or your doctors to know about you, what would that be?
That since my event, I'm a more caring person. I'm a more generous person. I'm less selfish. I look at it as everybody has the same opportunity that I do. I'm not better. I'm not worse. I'm pretty much equal with everybody else.
That's an interesting thing that caused you to see based on that event. I just want to say thanks for talking to us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me for the opportunity.
One other thing is when I got out of college, right after I got out of college, I was drafted in the Army and I ended up in the Korean War. I went over to Japan, we took some special training, and we went to Korea, and we were called sign locating specialists. And when a high power, one of the big cannons or something would go off, and we had two arrays on the top of a mountain out there. And they were 500 feet or better apart. And when that cannon would go off, you could push a button and you'd pick up the sound. And then we had little machines and we could oscillate to where we brought the sound waves into one, and that would give us a direction from our point to where that weapon was. And then you had the same thing on the other side so that you'd triangulate it on them. And at first nobody would believe what we were doing was any of value. And then one night we were being shelled continuously, and we picked up and we said we went to the forward observer who was on this outpost. We were in front of the main line of resistance a mile up on a mountaintop. And we went to him and we said, those cannon that are firing at us are right here. And we pointed to a point on the map, and they said, okay, we'll give it a try. Because nobody knew about this or believed in it. And they did. They fired 3 rounds in there, and then they sent a little Piper Cub up, and he went up, and they flew over, and they came back and they said, you wouldn't believe, you completely blew a battery apart with your being able to tell us where to fire.
Wow,
And
that's
was
pretty impressive.
Yes, it was. So, you know, I've had an interesting life. I enjoyed construction.
So if you'd like people to know something about you, like, for example, doctors that know you or are taking care of you, or anybody, what would you like them to know about you?
Oh,
It's a tough one.
no, my philosophy is live each day to the fullest, because you never know what the next day is going to bring. And always, I feel, have a good outlook on life. So many people get up and they're mad at the world. Maybe they're mad at their job, but I was never mad about the work I did. And I always loved getting up and facing the next day. And that's my whole philosophy. You know, just go with the flow.
Well, it seems to have served you well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So we were just talking about our ages, and that I was a bit too young in terms of being drafted for the Vietnam War, but you're wearing a Vietnam veteran's hat, and so you were there. It can be a tough thing to talk about. What was your experience there like?
Well, I don't talk too much about that. I can say is I learned a lot. I grew up a lot quick. You had to. I was just a kid when I went there. I was there for 22 months. And I just didn't worry, you know. I figured what was going to be was going to be. And you just had to be careful and watch yourself.
And you were in battle?
Not too much, no.
Okay,
Most of mine was out by like.
It was what?
Got an ordnance company over there. We had the ammo dump. Cam Ranh Bay was the biggest ammo dump in Vietnam. And I worked in the motor pool. I run equipment, drove truck, run dozer, run crane. Anything they needed, I had to do. So I was always doing something different. You know.
Did you have any close calls there?
Few. Nothing I want to have to talk about, you know.
I got you.
You used to go on convoys a lot. I'd volunteer to go and drive wrecker. And that's where I seen the worst stuff, you know.
What kind of work do you do?
I was a coal miner.
That was a tough job as well.
Yes, it was.
Also a fairly dangerous one.
Yes, it was.
Were you in any close calls in the mine?
A lot of them.
Really?
A lot of close ones, yeah.
You want to tell us about any of those?
I got covered up a couple of times with rock.
You were actually covered.
Not the whole body, just partially.
And did they
I
have,
never got real hurt, no.
did you know fellows that were?
Yes, I seen one guy crushed pretty bad. I had to dig him out.
It was tough to go back after that, I would bet.
Well, yeah, a little bit. But you just, I always put stuff out of my mind. You know, stuff happens, I just
Keep going.
keep going, you know, you have to.
So if you wanted your doctors to know one, or anybody really, to know one or two things about you, what would that be?
Well, I'm easygoing, but I'm strict. and I worked hard all my life. And I'm happy.
Well,
That's about it.
you can't beat that, working hard and happy. So you can't beat that.
Can't beat that at all.
Well,
Got a good life.
that's great. And we thank you for the service that you gave to
You're
the
quite
country.
welcome.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
What's your philosophy on life these days?
Now,
Yeah.
get a job. I'd just soon be working.
How old are you?
20. 84.
So you're retired.
If they call it that, I'd rather be working. No kidding.
I believe you.
Anybody thinks they can retire and they're going to have a nice, it ain't right.
You sound like you enjoyed your job.
I did. I didn't mind it. Never missed a day's work. I was there, 23 years, same job.
And this was in the coal mine,
Strip mine.
strip mine.
Yep. Dynamite for a strip job.
You were working with dynamite.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like the safest thing in the world to work with.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. The pay wasn't good, though.
Was not good.
No.
Well, what'd you have to do?
You poured the ammonia nitrate net down in the holes, and you put so much in it. Like if you got a 50-foot hole, you'd put about maybe 30 feet of explosive in it. And then you wired it up with electric, and you blowed it apart. Like I said, say you have 50 holes at one time, and they were, about 15 feet apart. But when you put it off, you could have probably set about 10 buildings in it. Just blow the whole thing apart.
So I'll be like a little kid and ask you, did you get to push the button?
Yeah, nobody else allowed.
And you set the charges as well.
Yeah, right. Electric.
That sounds like a lot of dynamite.
It was a lot of dynamite.
So who taught you how to do this?
Me.
You taught yourself.
Yeah. What they told me to do, it never come out right. And my brother-in-law said to me, there ain't no use of telling you nothing because you do the opposite, which I did. Because every time he told me how to do it, something went backwards.
Uh-huh.
So that's the way it went.
So let me ask you, if there's something that you thought you'd like your doctors or other people to know about you, what would that be?
Stay away from dynamite.
That's always a good suggestion.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us.
All right.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that project and hearing from some of those patients about the defining moments in their life and about what they wanted their caretakers to know about them. Again, it was a very meaningful project to me. I hope it was meaningful for the patients. I think it was. And I hope it was something that you enjoyed watching as well. I'm going to show you some pictures now before I close from the opening of that display when the patients came and got to see others looking at their portraits and listening to their stories. I do hope that if you find this kind of content interesting, that you'll consider subscribing to the channel below by clicking the button and turning on notifications. That would really help support the channel. And we'll see you next time.